Thank you.
All right, I want to thank all of you for joining us for this special presentation about the unique partnership relationship between the United States and Mexico. We were just talking about this, but we are planning to meet in person in the coming months. So stay tuned to that. Look at your email. We'll have some sort of component of in-person meeting. I know a lot of people are itching to meet in person, but we will also respect those who prefer to have programming via Zoom. We have an amazing and very thoughtful panel today with Agustin Barrios Gomez, Raul Rodriguez, and moderated by Alejandra Bueno, who you will all meet in a few minutes. I want to thank our promotional partners, NAD Bank and AEM. I had a chance to meet with this panel earlier this week or last week, and you all are in for a special treat. We have some really good conversations that they're going to share with you about the relationship between U.S. and Mexico. Please use the Q&A function to ask your questions. Let us know in the chat room how you're doing, where you're from, and keep that chat room going. We also have a program on Cinco de Mayo. It's our program on Iraq. So keep a lookout about that program. And if you're interested about membership or making a contribution or a gift, please click on the links that are provided to you in the chat room. I do want to quickly recognize several people who are joining us, including our friends from the Global Engagement Office of the City of San Antonio, CPS Energy, HEB, Bexar County, the U.S. Trade Office, NAD Bank, the Federal Reserve Bank, our good friend from Port San Antonio, Juan Antonio, the Consul General's Office for the UK, and the Honorary Consul to Spain, Mr. Steve Chiscano. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to Alejandra Bueno, who's been a really wonderful partner at Alamo Colleges. She has practiced law in Mexico and the United States. She's the Executive Director of International Programs at Alamo Colleges District. She has also been the CEO at R&I Solutions and worked with our friends at CCN, good old Robert Barnett, who's a board member of ours. She worked there. She's also worked in Mexico in federal agencies handling international affairs, in the Office of the President, the National Council for Science and Technology and Culture and Fine Arts. She's worked for the Governor of Texas as the Director for International Business and the Governor's Rep in the South Texas region. She has a law degree, master's degree, an LLM from UT Austin, very active in the community, and serves on several boards, including the San Antonio, Mexico Friendship Council, SAMFCO. She is also fluent in English, Spanish, and French. My good friend Alejandra from Alamo Colleges, take it away.
Thank you so much, Armen. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this very special event that the World Affairs Council of San Antonio is putting together to discuss the U.S. Mexico relations. First of all, I would like to say special thanks to Armen Barbajanian, the AM and NAD Bank for letting me having this opportunity to moderate this conversation about the relations between the U.S. and Mexico. A topic as relevant and as big as one can imagine. It is fascinating and complex. And of course, at this time, there is no exception to the rule. If complexity and importance, one should not stop at the border when we think in the U.S.-Mexico relation. It has a tremendous impact for both countries, for the North American region, and for the world. Today, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Raul Rodriguez Barroso. He's the Associate VP for International Affairs at Monterrey Tech in Mexico. He served as CEO of the North American Development Bank and chairman of the U.S. Mexico Foundation in New York. In San Antonio, he has been chairman of the World Affairs Council and Free Trade Alliance, founding co-chair of the city's International Advisory Council, distinguished professor, and Benson Chair in Banking and Finance at the University of Incarnate Word, honorary consul of Spain, and host of a weekly Univision TV interview newscast. He's an old friend of us from the several collaborative projects that we have participated together. He's also a member of the International Executive Advisory Committee at the Alamo Colleges District. Agustin Barrios Gomez is a businessman and opinion leader who is the CEO of International Capital Partners, an international investment firm and a member of the board of the Mexican Council on Foreign Relations, COMEXI. On Tuesdays, he hosts Trinchera Empresarial for Mundo Ejecutivo, a leading business magazine. A Mexican federal congressman from 2012 to 2015, he grew up as the son of a Mexican diplomat raised in Canada, Switzerland, and the US. He graduated from Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, and he has a master's degree from the Madrid Law School. He is a founding member of the Mexican Council on Foreign Relations and president of Fundacion Imagen de Mexico, dedicated to creating and promoting a narrative for Mexico and the U.S. Mexico relationship. Agustin is also a good friend that I met many years ago from many interactions that occur within the AM. And since the pandemic started, we're also very good friends on Twitter. Sharing always relevant content, I truly recommend everyone to follow him on Twitter. Agustin and Raul, we discussed last week that we can see that the U.S.-Mexico relation may be viewed from mainly two dimensions: the public or governmental dimension and the independent or grassroots dimension. Very different stories and aspects can be discussed on both areas. We recognize that the public aspects of the relations are comprised by critical topics such as migration, health, security, and trade. Investment in certain areas such as energy and other public policies that tend to impact the bilateral relation. At the grassroots level, we see dimensions of the relation that are more stable and that make the relation a much more consistent and important one, such as imports, export, education, and cultural and scientific collaboration. Then, of course, the relation can also be seen by regions and areas of great importance, such as the relation between Texas and Mexico, and of course, San Antonio and Mexico. Agustin and Raul, let me have your general thoughts about how the U.S.-Mexico relations have evolved over time up to today with the new administration in Washington and with the López Obrador administration. And how do you see the many opportunities and obstacles going ahead?
Thank you, Alejandra. Who would you like to start?
Go ahead, Agustin, please.
Oh, right. So basically, a shout out to the AEM. Like Alejandra says, the Asociación de Empresarios Mexicanos was the original forum where I had a chance to meet Alejandra and one of the participants here in this forum today. So we were talking about the past, present, and future of the U.S.-Mexico relationship, and that's a little bit how it was billed on the flyer that was sent. And so I would say that the past is a story of two countries that were born together, right, attached at the hip. New England and New Spain gave rise to the United States of America and the United Mexican States, which they ended up sharing about 850,000 square miles of territory in territory that is today, of course, the states of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Upper California, or U.S. California, Nevada, Colorado, and parts of Utah and Wyoming. And eventually Mexico ended up adopting about 90% of U.S. American political institutions. That is a bicameral Congress, a president, Supreme Court, et cetera, while the U.S. adopted Mexican territory, of course, as well as the dollar sign, which is actually the Mexican peso sign, Western cowboy culture, Mexican food and drink, and all of the things that we know today to be a part of greater North American identity. The present is the most intense bilateral relationship between two large countries anywhere, with the largest consular presence of any country anywhere, that is Mexico's in the United States. Outside of COVID, the most legally crossed border on the planet, the equivalent of the population of Canada in terms of Mexicans and Mexican Americans in the United States, that's 38 million. At the same time, Mexico is the #1 destination for the American diaspora. Here's a tidbit. We have 4 times as many Americans in Mexico as second place Canada. And just so you get an idea of the massive integration, which is the most integrated two large countries anywhere, I would say. One out of every 4 international flights leaving the United States to anywhere in the world, 1 out of every 4 has its destination Mexico. Mexico is not only the #1 destination for the United States, but actually has more visitors than the rest of the top 5 combined. I could go on to talk about thousands of different ways in which these two are the most integrated countries on earth, and I really could, but there is of course not enough time. But to go on to the present is also a product of mass Mexican migration, and through migration that has stoked probably the most virulent fires of nativism in the United States or the US has seen in a long time. It is at the same time the present is of a Mexican government that seems congenitally unable to appreciate the power and the opportunities afforded by North American economic integration. The present is riddled with American ignorance and Mexican inferiority complexes. The present is a Laredo that is the most important inland port in the world, but remains at the same time an urban backwater, always trying to catch up in terms of infrastructure, always underappreciated, always underfunded because of the narrative that has prevailed with respect to our shared border, which to me is one of the most interesting and one of the most dynamic places on earth. The immediate present means that the most legally cross-border station on the planet, which is San Isidro at San Diego, Tijuana, where usually we have about 140,000 people crossing every single day through 43 lanes of north and south traffic, is currently closed to Mexican visa holders. And in fact, we just had the ratification of that situation. There were some rumors that it was going to open up, but Homeland Security has now ratified that the closure has extended at least until the 21st of May. The future, just to wrap up, the future is in danger, of course, of being hijacked by ethnic strife in the United States. And at the same time, it's in danger of being limited by a Mexico that doesn't seem to know how to stop being a third world country. And worse, today it doesn't even seem to care enough to try anymore. And that's something that's a big red flag for the continent. In my dream of the future, the immigration problem is, of course, Americans and Canadians migrating to Mexico because of the better quality of life. But I fear a future in which the cumulus of Mexican policy mistakes and the lack of basic governance in Mexican territory creates a new wave of undocumented migration to the United States, which creates another backlash like we saw in 2015, a sort of social cytokine storm that consumes all of us. I would like a future like San Antonio, diverse, integrated community that goes back and forth between Mexico and the United States to everyone's benefit, a place of opportunity, freedom, and growth. That's what I would like. But I fear other things, other forces might prevail. More than most people, I actually believe that whatever ends up happening to be the future of both the United States and Mexico it depends much more than we realize on specifically the U.S. Mexico relationship. And I'd be happy to talk about more specific issues in the Q&A. Thank you.
Great, Agustin. Let me try to piggyback on what you just said, which was not only apt but accurate. And I think Alejandra and I will fully endorse your idea of hopefully the relationship evolving into a bunch of San Antonios on both sides of the border. You know, that epitomizes a dream in terms of positives on all sides. A big thank you to Armen and to Luis Moreno and the Council for hosting us. Great to be back with Alejandra and Agustin. We've done several of these over the past few years, and it's always a great pleasure. As Agustin was underscoring, I think we have a deeply intertwined and an increasingly interdependent relationship, but at the same time, it's extremely fragile on many fronts, and that is the big concern. Just to add some tidbits to what Agustin said on the demographic side of things, which is, as we all know, a tsunami of sorts happening as we speak. In less than 20 years, the US as a whole is expected to be a majority-minority nation, with all that implies in terms of the positives and the tension that will continue to impose on us. By next year, in fact, the largest population group in Texas will be a Hispanic. A vast majority of that obviously will be of Mexican origin. California has been a majority minority state for the past 7 years already. And just to give you a more detailed sense of what this means, in 2019, for every new non-Hispanic white resident in Texas, the state added 5.5 Hispanic residents. That's the nature of what is happening in terms of a transformation. And it goes beyond, by the way, migration. Most of what I just described has to do with natural growth, meaning births happening to people who are already here, most of them citizens. So again, it's not the kind of a tsunami that you can stem, if you would like to stem it, by stopping migration. It's already happening within our own reality. So that's what we have in terms of a new phase of America. Let me borrow a phrase from Arturo Sarucán, who is very eloquent at describing the relationship, as is Agustin. He likes to say that our relationship is very Dickensian. And by that, he means that at the same time, simultaneously, it always feels like this is the best of times and the worst of times, to quote Dickens. I'll try to give you an additional perspective to what Agustin already did, and taking advantage of my age, by the way, of what has happened over the past 50 years, roughly, and very quickly. In terms of the relationship. Before the 1990s, what we have was essentially mistrust and disregard. I think it was epitomized by the title of Ellen Whiting's famous book in 1985, Distant Neighbors. No better way to put it than that. Then starting in the late 80s and the beginning of the 90s, there was a drastic transition, a transformation of the relationship. Luis Rubio puts it very clearly. He said, starting with NAFTA and the NAFTA negotiation before that, Mexico started to think forward and outward instead of inward and backward. And I think it perfectly summarizes a huge transition in terms of the thinking and the mindset that was prevalent in Mexico before NAFTA and after NAFTA, at least until a few years back, not necessarily today. And we evolved into a sense of shared responsibility and even a sense of common destiny, which was unthinkable before NAFTA. And I think it added dramatically to the wealth of the positives, of the opportunities that entail in this relationship. And we go back not only to NAFTA, but to Bob Pastor and others who were thinking of North America, particularly in the context of the fall of the Berlin Wall, where they saw an opportunity for the region to integrate and for us to be competitive as a region. In fact, I was lucky to be in a very interesting session, a joint session of Congress in 2001 with Vicente Fox when he was president in Washington. And the buzzword in the whole session was trust on all sides, not simply on the side of President Fox's speech, but on all sides, we were discussing trust. It was a new ball game altogether, vis-a-vis the kind of environment and acrimony that we had lived before that time, before NAFTA. This event was about 5 days before 9/11, and suddenly the world changed completely, and there was a renewed caution, an entrenchment of sorts, where security was the new paradigm, and things completely changed from the kind of ballgame that we had before that. Since 2016, difficult to say. I'd say the jury is still out. What happens in the future will be defined with what we see over the near term in terms of migration, the evolution of the USMCA and energy particularly. And Alejandra, I hope you tell us about what your thoughts are. You share your thoughts on energy because you're the expert in this panel in that regard later on. Security, water issues, which always come back and take hostage the whole agenda. Border issues, needless to say. We're entering a new post-pandemic era, and we need to be much more engaged and creative than we've been over the past 4 or 5 years, needless to say. In terms of the urgent, obviously migration is the big issue. It's not only a drama, a human tragedy in many ways, but it's politically extremely complicated as we speak on all sides, particularly for the Biden administration, with 170,000+ apprehensions in March, a record number, 20,000 unaccompanied minors. And on the one hand, you have the expertise on the U.S. side. You have Mayorkas and Roberta Jacobson for 100 days helping out, Ricardo Zúñiga and Juan Gonzalez and Amy Pope and many others. And you have the 50 Mexican consulates active in one way or another. President López Obrador has suggested that at the climate summit in a couple of days, he's going to come out with a proposal. We'll see what that means. So far from his description, it doesn't sound exactly as the kind of thing that fits what we've heard from the Biden administration, but we'll see. And then on the other hand, you have, for example, Governors Abbott and Ducey suggesting that the migrant protection protocols, meaning the remain in Mexico policy, be adopted again, reinstated. And then, of course, you have the tremendous pressure on the Central American side, the Northern Triangle, particularly the complications from the political, climate change, you name it, economic angles in Honduras and other places are putting pressure into this. And then added to that, you have the always equally complicated and interlaced with migration, by the way, issues of security, all the way from drug trafficking to cybersecurity. And finally, the longer term issues. Climate change is going to be more and more in our radar scope as we move ahead, particularly those of us in San Antonio who lived through February can attest to that. Environmental sustainability, and once again, water particularly is going to be a big issue. If we've seen in the past tremendous issues along the border, periodically and on a seasonal basis in terms of drought, be prepared for what's coming. It is going to be a big problem in the center, at the core of our bilateral agenda. Alejandra, I'll leave it at that as my thoughts in terms of how the relationships evolve and what we're facing for the immediate future. I hope I have some time to address the positives, where the opportunities lie, and another question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There was some background noise here in my house. Thank you so much, both of you. Wonderful comments, and I think great introductory remarks. As I mentioned at the beginning, I see in my mind that we have these two big dimensions of this gigantic, really, relationship between the U.S. and Mexico. So many aspects, so many implications, right? But we can see that there's this public dimension, more governmental, and we can see also this grassroots dimension, more independent, more what is happening in between educational institutions or companies doing business or imports, exports, versus the big public events like migration or human trafficking, etc. So I see that there is one topic that is very important, that is lies in between, that is trade. And about that, I would like to ask you if we can focus a little bit our response on the new NAFTA and USMCA and some key actions taken by the AMLO administration, and it relates to message to investors, such as the cancellation of the airport in Mexico City or the cancellation of large investments, such as the Constellation Brands project. How can investment and trade continue to flow when recent governmental laws and policies are sending negative messages to the investors? I don't know, Agustin, would you like to begin?
Sure. So the first thing I would say, if Mexico was to have sort of a motto, it would be "Por si mueve," no, and yet it moves. So I think the quick answer is that it will continue. I think the quick answer is that, reshoring or sort of, coming to this side of the ocean is an ongoing thing for many different reasons, in terms of China becoming a more aggressive power and friction with the United States, in terms of supply chains being much more robust the closer they are. That sort of thing will continue to happen. Now, what will decline, and what has already started to decline, of course, are these macro investments in these multi-billion-dollar investments in energy. And when you have a government that has a hydrocarbon fetish and is strangely averse to private investment, particularly in sectors that it considers its own. And when I say its own, I really mean its own. I mean, it's a very felt thing. None of us who are outside of that ideological bubble can understand it, but for them, it's dogma. And so in that sense, you're going to see a lot of drop-offs. This is a government that in many ways is the product of one mind. And so as long as things keep happening at the grassroots level, and where he's not, where we don't have his attention on those issues, which it's not completely alien to the United States. I mean, there a lot of the Trump administration's policies were also very much about the personality of Donald Trump. So it's not something that's just a reality in Mexico. But what we are going to see is that a lot of the local investments, a lot of the local projects are going to go forward, including border projects. And there's a list of over 100 strategic projects for the country, and several of them are actually on the border, including the possibility of a binational city at Laredo, Nuevo Laredo. I mean, just really exciting stuff. Significant investments, of course, at Otay Mesa, at the new Otay Mesa crossing. The coming online of the massive investments that were already made in San Isidro at San Diego Tijuana, but the big stuff that was going on before, that's going to be put on the back burner. Now for Texas, I think that there's a negative impact from the energy side. From the positive side, insofar as Mexico has become a less attractive destination for investment, and we're a product of that. I mean, I'm the CEO and founder of a cross-border investment fund, and we buy commercial real estate in the United States, specifically in Texas. Most of our properties are actually in Texas, and a lot of our growth has come from the fact that Mexico has reduced its profile as an attractive destination for investments. And so we're just going to, Texas is obviously one of the great benefactors of that. And San Antonio particularly is one of the great benefactors of that. So that's what I would say, Alejandra.
Yeah, if I may add to your comment, in particular about the energy sector, I think San Antonio companies lie really in between these two dimensions, right? Between the public and the grassroots, because these companies, a lot of companies headquartered here in San Antonio, like Lewis Energy, New Star, Valero, Howard Energy Partners, they've been in Mexico from way before the energy sector, from way before the opening happened. So it's very interesting to see that these companies have a presence in Mexico despite any political environment, any messaging, and I'm sure they will remain there for the rest of the administration. But it's a coincidence, I don't know, but so many companies from San Antonio doing business in Mexico and remaining there despite the fact of current political environment. Raul, sorry,
no.
Interrupt your turn, but I wanted to touch on the energy side of it.
As I mentioned before, I think we discussed the fact that you shouldn't be a moderator. I mean, you're a great panelist, and particularly your experience in energy is vital to what is happening today. I think the great opportunity that underlies what you, Alejandra, and Agustin have just described, which I fully concur with, is the opportunity that stems from the fact that there is already happening, but there's going to be even a greater realignment and decoupling, to a certain extent at least, of the U.S.-China economic links and value chains. And that is the great opportunity for the region, but particularly for Mexico over the next few decades. If Mexico does it right in terms of policies and decisions and signals, as Agustin underscored, it's going to be benefiting like never before from the global dynamics. I mean, I would definitely leave what has happened under NAFTA behind in terms of the opportunities that lie ahead, if again this is done in the right way. Because what the opportunities that are underscored by this have to do with joint production processes, not simply trade. And again, I'm not diminishing the importance of trade, but it goes far beyond that. on biomedical and biotech, on artificial intelligence, on aeronautics, on cybersecurity, you name it. I mean, there's so much to be done if we do it right on the Mexican side. There's a chapter under USMCA, and it's chapter 26 on competitiveness, which calls for a coordinated approach to bolstering competitiveness in the region. I think it should completely focus on what we're just discussing now, bring back the high-level economic dialogue, which wasn't perfect, but at least it was a forum for discussion in the past. I think, again, the ways to coordinate, the ways to explore, the rethinking of North America, very much along the lines of what Bob Pastor did, 20, 25, 30 years ago, and that to a certain extent led to the dynamics that eventually were built the context for NAFTA to happen, are there. And again, we're not building on small things. Mexico is today the U.S. main trading partner, number one trading partner. And most people know that, but most people don't know the fact that 6 states have Mexico, at least had Mexico last year as the first destination of their trade, and 19 in the states had Mexico as the second destination. In the case of Texas, we sold more to Mexico in 2020 than the total of our sales to the UK, plus Germany, plus the Netherlands, plus Belgium, plus France, or more than what we sold to China plus Japan in Texas. And we're the lead state in exports in the States. So Mexico purchased a third of our 2019 exports, more than the sum total of the next 7 destinations. And in certain years, it's been more than the next 17 destinations. Close to 500,000 jobs, 500,000 jobs in Texas depend on U.S. Mexico trade. Imagine that taken to the next step, which is bolstering what we already do in terms of producing together and being competitive vis-a-vis the rest of the world, because of the fact that there's a realignment of value chains happening today. I mean, there's endless possibilities, again, if Mexico does it right. There should be a sense of urgency on the Mexican side, beyond the obvious, which is jobs. And it has to do with the fact that Mexico is aging very rapidly. The census number just came out in Mexico a couple of months ago, and they're alarming in a number of ways. The median age of the population in Mexico, meaning half of the population below that age, half above that age, went from 17 in 1970 to 29 in 2020. It's the aging process in Mexico is such more rapid than the one we have in the States, because of the fact that fertility rates in Mexico just dropped dramatically since the 1960s. So the demographic bonus in Mexico is just fading very rapidly. And there's going to be huge fiscal pressure and you name it, because of the fact that the population is aging. So again, if this doesn't instill a sense of urgency in Mexico, I don't know what will. There's an opportunity coming up in June 6th. There's a midterms elections happening in, 48 days from today. And I'm not suggesting who should win, but I'm simply saying that this is going to be a referendum on policies. This is going to be a number of things, including a sense of what will happen in 2024. And I hope it becomes a sense of urgency. Because of what I mentioned, and I hope it sends a signal to the government, to Morena, to the parties, to whomever is going to have a stronghold on Congress over the next few years, and the federal government, in terms of what Mexico should be doing to take better advantage of its opportunities, not simply to face the obvious challenges that we've discussed over the past few minutes, but more importantly, to piggyback on the kinds of globalization changes, the dramatic new trends that we will be seeing, or we're already seeing in the world today.
We have a couple of questions, Alejandra.
Yes.
Also, being a television as the host, I pick up a lot on these things. But Teresa Canales asks where the statistics are available. They're all over the place. The Department of Commerce has a lot of these numbers. There's a fantastic document, if I may highlight it, because it was written by our two top negotiators, Juan Carlos Baker and Ken Smith. I coordinated it via the COMEXI, and you can find it on our website. It's in English and in Spanish. consejomexicano.org. consejomexicano.org. In the U.S. Mexico tab, you can find that there's a document that has a lot of statistics and a specific chapter written by these two amazing negotiators, two of the best negotiators, in my view, in the world in terms of treaties, in terms of trade treaties, and you can find that on the COMEXI webpage. In terms of the prospects for Biden-Lopez Obrador cooperation vis-a-vis Central American migration, especially refugee flow, Arnold Vela mentions the fact that Lopez Obrador has a proposal for reforestation. I don't really see too much in that, because the execution of this government is poor across the board, simply because there's a disdain for professionalism and for the ability to do anything. And so their execution in Mexico in terms of their reforestation project has been terrible. I would imagine that those same vices would carry forward into whatever scheme that he's thinking for Central America. So I wouldn't think too much in those terms, but I do think that Lopez Obrador will continue to basically do what the U.S. asks in terms of putting a stronger border along the Rio Suchiate, along the Chiapas and Tabasco border with Guatemala. I do think that the Guardia Nacional could be called back. They were called away, but now they're being called back to try to limit that transmigration phenomenon. I don't see too much of a future in terms of the efforts vis-a-vis investment in Central America. I just don't see how it works, because at the end of the day, you know, us foreign affairs people, we know that at the end of the day, what you need in Central America, and in many ways what you need in large parts of Mexico, is nation building. And nobody likes nation building these days, unfortunately. But that's the bottom line, and it's not gonna get significantly better until we do that. So until we do that, we will see the Mexican law enforcement presence at the border, and that's the only way that I see that transmigration is going to be limited.
Ale, if I may, let me add a couple of
Sure.
other reports to what Agustin just suggested, what I fully agree with. UC San Diego, under Rafael Fernández de Castro, has put together a group. I think we're maybe 70 or 80 from the US and Mexico on what's called the 2025 Forum. And the reports are going to be coming out over the next few weeks. Chris Wilson, Chap Lawson, Tom Long, and other experts on these topics, particularly based in the Wilson Center, but also Aspen and COMEXI itself and Harvard, are coming up with a book this summer. It's called North America 2.0. So that's going to be very interesting. And then Wilson Center, COMEXI, U.S. Mexico Foundation, and others have come up with, for example, a partnership vision report from a gathering of 12 former ambassadors, U.S. and Mexico, Mexico and the U.S. in January of 2020. And the report is available under the Wilson Center and the U.S. Mexico Foundation websites. There's a shared border, shared future having to do with labor mobility report that was headed by Carlos Gutierrez and by former President Zedillo. And that's a great report on labor mobility specifically. And finally, one on which is vital in terms of joint workforce development that was headed by Ambassador Tony Wayne. So again, there's an abundance of information out there, very timely, and as I was underscoring a couple of times, we need a vision for North America, and I think the ingredients are very much there. And the next step is, how do we take advantage of the opportunities that are outlined in many of these reports?
Yes, data will never fail you, and it's so important to rely on transparent that data and other sources, unbiased, right? So we can form our own opinions. Moving into, before we move into a more favorable and stable aspects, I just would like to remind you that you can use the chat box for Q&A. We're monitoring, as you see, your questions here, and we're trying to respond as many as we can as our panelists speak, but we will try to respond at the end. We still have some time ahead. I would like to move to a more positive aspect about the relationship between the US and Mexico. And I'd like to ask Agustin, we know that the border can always paint a very different and better story of the US Mexico relations. You already mentioned that. Tell us from your perspective, what are some opportunities that you see of important growth that can benefit this region, the overall economics of the region?
Sure. Just a brief shout out to Luis Moreno. I think he was mentioned by Raul briefly, and I would like to thank him again for the original invitation that was remiss at the beginning of my 5 minutes. Also, I would like to call attention that on the chat, the good people at the World Affairs Council have actually placed a lot of the links to the information that was being mentioned very completely and very impressively by Raul. That was an excellent review of the resources available. So the US-Mexico border, 2,000 miles, 3,000 kilometers. It has a higher population growth than either of its hinterlands. That is, it is growing at a faster rate than either the US in terms of the American side and Mexico in terms of the Mexican side. It is ex-COVID, it is the most legally crossed border on the planet. 350 million border crossings per day. That's about 1 million border crossings per day through 330 ports of entry. It is an incredibly dynamic and very diverse place from the from the ports and the activity. Now a spaceport in Brownsville, which affords another opportunity for Matamoros to get into the cluster of aerospace, and Elon Musk and making all these investments there, now actually calling for engineers to move down to Brownsville and La Isla del Padre or South Padre Island, all the way through, like I mentioned, the most important land port, or rather inland port on the planet, which is Laredo, Nuevo Laredo, 14,000 tractor trailers per day going through there. Just an incredibly dynamic place, and an incredible project with Proyecto 4-5 on that border. That's 3,000 hectares. That's what 6,000 acres in what we could see as a new logistics hub for North America. Over at Borderplex in El Paso, Juarez, very exciting things going on there. Juarez being, its reputation notwithstanding, Juarez is actually an incredibly important manufacturing hub, and the people of El Paso know that, and they're very integrated, and lots of really cool stuff going on there. Is the different Nogaleses and what's going on in Arizona is with a lot of activity in Phoenix and inland, but also with a relationship between Arizona and Sonora. It's very, very vibrant and with technology and with, of course, agriculture. As you know, 70% of US food imports actually come from Mexico. So a lot of stuff going on over there. And of course, Otay Mesa 2, which is this new, very advanced commercial border crossing in Southern California, Southern Upper California, Northern Baja California. And the just renovated massive expansion that took place at San Isidro, which is just, of course, passenger traffic. So enormous amounts of opportunity, apart from the incredible natural beauty that is unknown to most North Americans at Big Bend National Park and along the Rio Grande. Now, having said that, is Raul's point about climate change is certainly a big deal. The Rio Grande, Diagonal Rio Bravo, has been affected by the drought conditions. On the western side, the mighty Colorado is a trickle of its former self, and very soon we could see, for the first time, federal restrictions, as all of the dams on that side, which provide water to so many millions of people in Phoenix and Las Vegas, in Los Angeles, that gets affected. And of course, that affects the Gulf of California, which is the Sea of Cortez, and Sonora. And we could see Mexico having to sit down again at the table to talk about water. So massive, massive things going on in there. Sherry Daulachahi asks about the federal, the Alianza Federalista by 10 states. So you have these 10 states that see themselves as being more developed and more forward-looking, more North American in many ways, because there is a debate at the end of the day. It's a debate between North American Mexico and Central American Mexico. And so these states see themselves as part of, they want to take advantage of those opportunities that Raul mentioned. And they have created this project. But at the end of the day, given the current federal constraints, unless they go whole hog and pull out of the fiscal pact, which is a fiscal pact, it is not a constitutional pact. It is a fiscal pact where Mexican states devolve or hand over their sovereign power to tax over to the federation. And this actually needs to be done every year, by the way, it's not a part of the Constitution. Unless they're willing to really go, and take a very strong and aggressive stand vis-a-vis the federal government, there's really not much else they can do. Which doesn't mean that I don't see the possibility of there being, separatist movements in certain parts of Mexico. I do believe that that's something that could happen, given the tension that's going and the social tension that's going on in Mexico. But at this current moment, I would not say that it's anything more than a political posture.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you so much, Agustin, for also taking that question from Sherry. And again, I think this dimension of the border and the grassroots dimension, the border is the place where it shows best, right? That dimension and how the activity will continue to happen no matter what. It's going on the other public or governmental dimension. Raul, I would like to move to another topic where I know you are a true expert. I know your trajectory in the education field and your understanding of international collaboration in the academic sector. Can you tell us about some good projects or opportunities that you see can be highlighted for the U.S. Mexico relation?
Gladly, Ali. Let me just add one quick thing to what Agustin said.
Sure.
Again, I'm fully on board in terms of how he depicts the border and the opportunities and challenges ahead. One thing I would add is we keep seeing the border and the way the border is managed and how we plan and how we coordinate very much with the veil of 19th century sovereignty. That's the kind of framework that we use, and we have 21st century problems ahead and opportunities, and we simply can't deal with them with that kind of bifurcated vision of how the border works and what it's all about. I'll give you an example. The CLIBWC, I mean, there's very many virtues to that framework, but it is not going to be it is not going to have the agility that will be needed to face climate change kind of challenges ahead. The way that the IJC on the U.S. Canadian side of things works. There's a huge difference. So unless we revisit the way we perceive, we plan, we coordinate along the border, it's going to be very difficult to tackle the challenges that you described. Having said that, going to the easier side of academics, I had the opportunity to do a fireside chat with Prime Minister Lee from Singapore right before the pandemic shutdown. And interestingly, he underscored, I thought he was going to go on about what they're doing in terms of technology and international affairs and so forth. And most of the time we spent on lifelong learning and education technology and the joint campuses they have with other countries and the global experience and mentality that is very much imbued in young people in Singapore, and how that has made a tremendous difference over the past 60, 70 years in Singapore, and the linchpin to what his father did and what he is doing. So taking those lessons into account, I'd say that we have maybe 3 different aspects of what we have accomplished or what we have in terms of academic links between the US and Mexico. Definitely not enough to begin with in terms of student mobility, in terms of student exchange. Roughly 15,000 Mexican students are studying abroad particularly mostly in the U.S. And today, in fact, there's a stigma to studying abroad in the context of government policies and diminishing support in terms of scholarships and so forth. So a big issue. South Korea, just to give you an example, has half of the Mexican population, and it has 3.5 times as many students in the States. I mean, just to give you an example. Vietnam, which is about 75% of our population in Mexico, has almost double the number of students, of Vietnamese students in the States. So a big opportunity missed, particularly since we're right next door and the connections are so many, and it's relatively easy to expand on the language skills on the Mexican side. So number one, not good enough. Number two, scarce but improving higher education joint programs. Monterrey Tech, I dare say, has it in its DNA to do this since inception over 75 years ago. Very much linked to innovation, entrepreneurship. And Monterrey Tech, for example, is number 5 in the Princeton Review's list of entrepreneurship universities in the world, number 1 outside the US. Huge connections with MIT, joint programs, you name it. Along the border with UT system, with UC, with ASU. And then, of course, what you have at UNAM and CIDE and Colmex and COLEF. I mean, increasing links and very positive of that. Nowhere close to what Europe accomplished early on in its unification process. And then unprecedented cooperation in terms of university and think tank networks and events and reports, as we just mentioned. I mean, some of the reports that Agustin and I listed have to do with universities. I mentioned the UCSD-led Forum 2025, which is great. The Woodrow Wilson Center is very much linked to universities. NASCO, COMEXI, the Bush Institute, the Puentes Consortium at Rice University, the U.S. Mexico Foundation, working with several of us. I could go on and on. This afternoon, actually, there's a great program on medical science without borders. That's the title, between Arizona State and Monterrey Tech. We've had a long-standing relationship with Michael Crow at ASU and his great leadership. So again, it's a mixed bag. On the one hand, not enough in terms of exchanging students, which, as we all know, and Agustin and you and I can attest to that, it makes a difference not only in our personal lives, but in terms of how we understand North America down the line, and once we're in our professional pathways, and how we help build that relationship. The fact that we studied abroad, and particularly in the US.
Yeah.
So that's the big challenge.
I can say that now that the mobility is so limited because of the pandemic, we are doing much more in terms of virtual exchanges between institutions from the US and Mexico.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the time has run out. Armen, thank you so much for having this panel, for having us here. It was really a tremendous pleasure to be the moderator today with Agustin and my good friend Raul Rodriguez Barrios. Thank you so much for everything. And now I'm turning you the powers back. Armen, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. I want to finish my remarks before Agustin has to literally race through the airport to get to his flight. So thank you for sacrificing your last minutes to join us. Mr. Rodriguez, thank you so much. We have an extraordinary discussion. It is humbling to just be able to sit back and watch you all have a dynamic discussion, but also do it in a very friendly way and engaging way. Thank you to Alejandra, who represents Alamo Colleges, one of our solid partners with the World Affairs Council. Very, very much appreciate your participation and your support. I also want to thank all of you for tuning in. This is being recorded, so we'll send it out to everyone who registered. But thank you again for this remarkable presentation. We had some people watching from Mexico, but we also had someone from Prague joining in. One of my mentors, Mr. Given, is joining us from Prague. Cinco de Mayo is coming up. I know this panel is interested in that for many reasons. And on that day, we have a great program on Iraq and where we are today. And we have special guest Joanne Cummings, General Strickland, and it will be moderated by Ambassador Moreno. Remember, we can't do this without your support. And we appreciate you looking into what membership looks like, and any gift that you can provide to the council is very much appreciated. Like I said in the beginning, if you would like to stay tuned to learn about our in-person programming, we're looking at that to making it valuable and making it safe for everyone. We appreciate you for registering and taking time out of your day to listen to these wonderful guests. And I wish you all a great week and a great day, and safe travels to you, Agustin.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.